So before I start, I would like to ask you to greet the person right next to you as if this is the first time you see them today. So thank you. Something that I noticed was that for some people it was a quite easy task because you knew the person sitting next to you. But however, I saw other people struggling because you did not know the person sitting next to you. So you did not know their customs or their culture, so you did not really know how to approach them. And for me, this is something I've been struggling with my whole life. And this for the fact that I'm a third culture kid. So about 18 years ago, my parents fled from Africa to Holland. And around that time, I was about 2 years old. So I basically grew up here, and growing up I've mostly attended white schools, and with this I mean to say that everyone in my school was like literally white. And because of this reason, most of my friends were also white. And to some it may sound silly, but therefore I sometimes tended to forget that I was a bit different. And it wasn't until a few years ago when one of my closest friends, she asked me about my opinion on the Black Pete discussion. And I knew she did not ask me because she thought I was so smart or because I was such a problem solver. She asked me because I was black. And that got me thinking. And I started to ask myself, but what defines me then? Do my values do that for me? Or does the color of my skin do that for me? And within that moment, I started an identity quest. And during this identity quest, I stumbled upon the term third culture kid. And what this term basically means is, it means that you as a child grow up in a different culture than the culture your parents grew up in. And for me, this was the first time the puzzle pieces came together. This was the first time I finally understood why actual home never really fully felt like a home to me. But because it's such a broad topic, I decided to split my topic up into different research areas. The first being identity. The second being the self-development of a refugee kid. And the third being the social services system as found here in Holland. So identity, if you approach this term from a psychological perspective, it comes in two levels. The first being the personal level, so your personality. What makes you you and what makes me me. The second level being the group level. So what for instance binds me to my friends or family. And you could think of binding factors such as skin color, ethnicity, location, religion, education, etc. So I had always identified myself as Dutch, up until this question was posed to me. This is when I started to reevaluate my identity on a group level. And when I did so, I started to look for binding factors between me and my peers. But when I did so, I noticed there weren't that many. I did not have the same skin color. I did not even belong to the same social class as they did. So logically, I turned to my roots. But when I did, once again, there wasn't a fit. I did have the same skin color as they had, but I didn't speak the same language. And my values, they were mostly Dutch-based, while they were African. So within this moment, I lost my identity on a group level. And this made me feel sad. So I started to wonder and started to ask myself, where did it go wrong? So I started to look back into my history. I started to look back into my past. So, as I had already mentioned, my family, we are refugees. And being refugees had quite a heavy load on us. Not only in the pre-migration phase, so not only before we came here, but also in the post-migration phase. So when we were already currently living in our new home country. And because I was quite young when I came here, my self-development, it took place here. And there's just a little bit I would like to explain to you about self-development and especially about values. When you're younger, your values are mostly influenced by the upbringing your parents give to you. So they teach you whether something is right or wrong or good or bad. And the older you get, the more factors start to influence these values. So at one point you start going to school, and school starts to influence you. And later on your friends and your peers do, and maybe even your job. So this is what happened to me. My once African-based values, they started to shift over to Dutch-based values. Because at one point I started going to school, and as already mentioned, I went to a white school. So it started to influence me. And later on, my friends did as well, and they were Dutch. At one point, my values started to clash with my parents' values. You could even say that we stopped speaking the same language. I started to speak Western, while they stayed African. You could even state that our intercultural communication, it got poor. And intercultural communication, it's a term that describes a communication between two cultural backgrounds. Because once again, I became Western while they stayed African. And because they never experienced the Dutch culture on the level I did, because I grew up here, I felt less and less understood. We stopped seeing eye to eye on certain aspects in life. And therefore, over time, I started to slip more into the role of a third culture kid and felt more and more left out. So at one point, social services needed to step in. But the thing is, it only got worse. And the reason it got worse is because the social services system, as found here in Holland, is based on a Western problem-solving approach. So it's all about the individual. So during therapy sessions, they would pose questions to me, such as, what do you think is best for you? So it was only benefiting me. And what they do is they teach you to think as an individual. And by teaching you to think as an individual, you will start moving as an individual. So this is exactly what I did. I started to move away from my family as an individual. But this is something I did not see back then. That's something I only see now when doing my research. So I started to ask myself, isn't there anyone who wrote a theory on this matter? And this is when I found an expert called Kitlin Chin Aji. What she did is she wrote a theory on this matter called protection codes. And what protection codes does is it takes the term collectivism in account. And collectivism, that's something that's found in a lot of non-Western cultural backgrounds. Collectivism, it's all about the us, it's all about the we, it's all about the group. So during therapy sessions, she would pose questions to you such as, what do you think is best for the family? What do you think is best for the group? So what she does is she makes you think as a group. And by thinking as a group, you will start moving as a group. And now looking back, I think it's such a pity that this wasn't applied in my home situation. Because if so, I think a lot of progress would have been made. Now at the beginning, I asked you guys to greet the person next to you. And something that I noticed is that some people, they just said hello, others waved, some gave a hand and some even a hug. And it's funny to me how such a simple gesture, it has so many ways to approach it. And that's something I have been struggling with my whole life. Because growing up in a Western culture, when you meet someone for the first time, you shake their hand. And I was living in a Western culture at school. But at home, in the African culture, when you met someone for the first time, you gave a hug. So growing up, I had to constantly adjust between these two cultures. And this was so energy consuming for me. And it made me feel so lonely at times. I decided I wanted to do research on this topic, and I wanted to become an expert on this topic. This so I could help other youngsters to see the fact that having both cultures in your life could be such a beautiful aspect to your identity. Because along the road, you get to create and know more values. And maybe even with a little luck, I get to change the social services system as found here in Holland. Thank you.